To the third edition of Politics for Dummies. Today, we're going to go over what I think a lot of Democrats fear, and that is what if what happens in 2016 happens? What if Donald Trump overperforms and beats the polls, like he did against Hillary Clinton on election day in 2016? Um, so what we have here is a map um, of states that were decided by less than 5 percentage points. So these are states in 2016 that were very close, considered very close on this map. So there are about 10 or so states here, and this labels states that are much more competitive this time around, like Ohio, Texas, and Georgia as red states because they were decided by more than 5 points in the last election, but obviously this year it looks like those states will be a lot closer. So we're just going to focus on the states that you don't see colored in yet, based on the polling that we have now. So what we're going to do is look at the state that Donald Trump overperformed in the most, which is Wisconsin. So on election day, Hillary Clinton had about a 5 point lead, a little bit over a 5 point lead in Wisconsin, and of course Donald Trump ended up winning by less than a percentage point. Um, in most other states, for instance, in Pennsylvania, um, Hillary Clinton had about a almost 4 point lead in Pennsylvania, and of course Donald Trump won by a little bit less than a percentage point again. The same thing in Michigan. Hillary Clinton had about a 4.2 point lead, and Donald Trump won by about less than a percentage point. So, without taking out a calculator, averaging out those numbers, let's say that we'll give Donald Trump +5. So we'll give him an extra 5 points in the polls as they were today, and then we'll see which states he still wins and doesn't win. So we're giving Donald Trump as of today, July 15th, an extra 5 points in the polls, and usually the margin of error is around 3.5 to 3.8%. So we're giving him another point and a half about. So we're really giving him the benefit of the doubt in this video. So let's look. We'll go in alphabetical order of the states that were very close last election. So that would be starting with Arizona. So Arizona, a generally Republican state, was a close race last election, but Donald Trump still won it. And if you look at the polling here, current polling has Joe Biden up by 2.1 points over Donald Trump. So again, we add 5 points to Donald Trump if we want to assume that he's going to overperform by about the most he's overperformed in any state, and um, then we'll give that state to Donald Trump. So that's kind of how things are going to go. Even though Joe Biden is leading by 2.1 points, if we're going to say Donald Trump is going to overperform about the highest level that he did in 2016, then we'll give Arizona to Donald Trump. But remember, he didn't overperform in the West. So even though this map, we're still going to do it this way. If things kind of stayed the same as they were in 2016, then Biden may still carry Arizona based on the fact that it is in a state with changing demographics that are leaning more Democratic than Republican. But for this, we'll give Arizona to Donald Trump. Okay, moving on to the next battleground state. Actually, Colorado, which, again, if you look in 2016, this was a competitive state. Hillary Clinton won it, but she won it by 5 points or less. And if you look at the polling now, Joe Biden's up by 16.5 points. So even if you minus the 5, give it back to Trump, he still has a double-digit lead, which kind of shows you where the demographics are heading in that area. So Joe Biden would still gain Colorado, and that's more of a safe bet than any other state that we're going to go through on this list, considering the way things have panned out for the Democratic Party in Colorado. lately since 2016. Again, even with the 5 point uh, that we're giving Donald Trump in these polls, he'll Joe Biden would still carry the state by more than 10 points. Okay, so we'll move on to Florida. Obviously, this is a state that Donald Trump has to win. If the Democrats take Florida, it will take a minor miracle for the Republicans to win the election. And you look here, as of July 15th, again, Joe Biden's up by 6.5 points. So we can subtract that 6.5 points by 5, and it still gives Joe Biden a 1.5 point advantage, which is actually more than Hillary Clinton had leading into Election Day. So again, the places where Donald Trump outperformed the most was in this area: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Those were areas where he outperformed the polls by about 4 to 5 points. But in these areas, Hillary Clinton had less than a 1% lead in Florida, and Donald Trump won by about 1 point. So we're giving him the benefit of the doubt for today and giving him 5 points, which is a lot more than he outperformed Hillary in 2016. And still, Joe Biden has a 1.5 point advantage. So we do that right there. And considering Colorado is a very safe bet, at 16.5 points at this point, and Joe Biden's already up to 239 points. That already brings him over the the threshold that Hillary was at. And again, we left the states that were Hillary Clinton states by more than 5 points, considering Joe Biden is polling higher than Hillary Clinton. If Hillary Clinton won that state by more than 5 points, then um, no polling is showing Trump really doing better than he was against Hillary Clinton right now. So that's why those states are still staying the same. States like Virginia or New Mexico, where Hillary won by 5 points or more, we can't. We're not really gonna go into seeing what would happen if you had 5 points because those states are already in double digits for Joe Biden. But again, Georgia's a state we're not going to go into, because in 2016 Donald Trump did win the state by more than 5 points. So for this discussion where we're talking about Trump overperforming the polls, um, if he did that, he would carry Georgia. But just for reference, as we see today, Joe Biden is still leading in Georgia. The lead has kind of shrunk a little bit since July 1st from 1.7 to zero point 0.6, but he still has consistently been up since really the beginning of June, kind of showing the stability. So for over a month now, Joe Biden has been leading in Georgia on average. So let's move over to Maine, which doesn't have a lot of polls out there, but we could just see, by the most recent ones, one from July and one from March, that Joe Biden has been up by 10 and 11 points. So Hillary did win the state in 2016, and Joe Biden looks like he will continue that thread, and he'll gain those 2 electoral votes. And we won't go into the districts right now because those were decided by more than 5 points. Okay, so moving on from Maine, we'll go to Michigan, obviously a big state that Donald Trump picked up in 2016. And if we look at the polling today, the lead has gone down a little bit, but Joe Biden has led in Michigan since March, since even before the pandemic began. He had a much slimmer lead, about 2.7, but ever since the pandemic came full force by April, that lead has increased, getting to as high as 10, and right now it stands at 8.7. So again, if we take out 5 points, it would still be a 3.7 lead for Joe Biden, and that's one state that seems more confidently to be flipped this election due to just the consistency. Trump hasn't led even since before the pandemic. And you could see how since the pandemic really hit, how those numbers have affected his polling averages in the state. Um, so Joe Biden has a great chance of flipping the state of Michigan. And moving on from Michigan, Minnesota was decided by 5 points or less in 2016. Again, it's around that area with these three states that Donald Trump won by less than 1 percentage point, and it ended up making the difference in the electoral college. In Minnesota, Hillary Clinton won um, by less than 5 points, and you could see here not a lot of polling, not enough polling to see that graph 538, but you could see here in a May poll, Biden was leading 5 points, and in a June poll, he led by 16 points. So again, not a lot of polling, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that if he's leading in states that Hillary didn't win in 2016, then he's probably doing better in the pollings in states that she actually did win in. Plus, minus that 5 point advantage, you either have a tie, or if you take the 16-point advantage, obviously Joe Biden would still be leading. So we'll give Minnesota the edge to Joe Biden. So at this point, Joe Biden has only flipped two states, Michigan and Florida. And obviously, Florida is a big one, accounting for the third most electoral votes in the country, along with New York, which is safely in this category. Texas being the second most, which again is red here because um, Donald Trump won it by more than 5 electoral votes, but the polling is clearly a lot closer this election. But he's only 3 electoral votes away from victory just by adding those two states. But we'll move on from Minnesota and we will go to Nebraska and the second district. Um, so Donald Trump won the second district in Nebraska um, in 2016. But right now, from polls in May and July, again, not a lot of polls, but with the polls that they do show, they have Biden with a 7 point lead, an 11 point lead, -5. That's still enough to give Biden that one electoral vote. May not seem like a lot, but it could make a difference if the election ends up being very close. We'll move to Nevada, a state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016, but it was a close election, decided by less than 5 points. You could see here Joe Biden, he did, in the middle of May, he was, below that 5 point threshold just by a little bit, but now as of July 15th, he's up 7.9, so he's 2.9 ahead of that 5 points that we're giving Trump in this scenario. So that brings him over the mark. So right now, Joe Biden has only flipped Florida and Michigan and the one electoral vote in Nebraska, and that has brought him to 274 electoral votes. And that is giving Donald Trump 5 extra points from what polling is currently showing. Again, this is as of today, so the election took place today. Things could change a lot within the next 3.5 months. You don't know what's going to happen with the economy or the pandemic, and if those numbers will change how people view his his job performance um, throughout this time. But as of right now, we're giving Donald Trump 5 points, and Joe Biden is still coming out on top. And there's still 4 more states, and we'll see how those states land. So New Hampshire, Hillary Clinton barely won this state, and as of today, Joe Biden's leading by 7.4 points. He's led since March, and again, with the thresholds that we're using, he would also carry the state of New Hampshire and those 4 electoral votes. We'll go down to North Carolina, a state that Donald Trump won, and you see Joe Biden is leading by 2.6 points So again, in these states where Joe Biden is carrying a very slim margin, if we're gonna say Donald Trump is gonna outperform the polls as he did in 2016, then we'll give that state to Donald Trump. If as a Democrat, and any Democrats watching, if you are worried about him outperforming these polls, as I'm sure many people are, and Donald Trump and his staff and his supporters say, look what happened in 2016. His The polls showed that he was definitely going to lose, and he outperformed them, and he won Wisconsin, he won Michigan, he won Pennsylvania. Um, so things to keep in mind is one, Donald Trump was campaigning hard in those states, and Hillary Clinton did not campaign in those states. How much of a difference the campaigning has, we don't know, and what is campaigning going to look like during a pandemic. We saw one rally by Trump in Oklahoma that didn't go so well, and now people are saying that it may have caused a spike in the state. So we don't know if how many rallies are really going to take place this summer, and how much is that going to make a difference for Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But um, that's one thing to think about. And the other thing to think about is that, yes, he did outperform the polls, but how much did he outperform the polls by? It's not like, say, um, Hillary Clinton in the polls was leading by 15 points in states, or 20 points by states like Illinois and New York, and then Donald Trump, you know, surpassed that and won. It was states where she held, in one state, more than a 5 point advantage. In every other state, based on the 538 polling data, um, in every other state, it was less than 5 points, which is still a little bit beyond the margin of error, but again, not so far beyond the margin of error that it should seem like a miracle that he won. And that's why I wanted to go through the map using, yes, the same numbers that he outperformed in these swing states. And again, he didn't outperform all across the country. He outperformed mainly in this particular Midwest um, region in Pennsylvania. So let's move on to those last two states, because those were two other states that Donald Trump needed to win the election in 2016: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, um, and so let's just go to Ohio before we go over there, because Ohio, Donald Trump won by more than 5 points. But this election cycle, it looks, at least right now, to be a little bit closer. Biden is leading by 1.8 points. Again, if we're going to use the outperforming Trump map, this map that shows Trump outperforming polls by 5 percentage points, then Trump would still win Ohio, and that's why we still have it marked in red. But right now Biden is leading by 1.8 points, and he has led more consistently than Trump throughout this election cycle, um, holding small leads. So for whatever that's worth, um, we'll see what happens. The Democrats don't need to win Ohio in November, but obviously if they do, that's a huge sign of how the election might go. But we'll go to Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden is leading by 7.4 points. And today you could see the Monmouth University poll, which is rated A plus by Pennsylvania. There are three polls released here. One is between likely voters, one between unlikely voters, and those enthused to vote. I forget which is which, but um, you could see that in every one it's over 5 points. So we have a 13-point advantage in one of these polls, a 10-point advantage in another, and a 7-point advantage in another. So let's actually just look, just for curiosity's sake, what these polls showed as of today. So between registered voters, um, so people who are actually registered to vote right now, Joe Biden has a 13-point advantage over Trump, and a higher likely turnout. So these are voters who are more likely to come out and vote. He holds a 10-point advantage. And if you want to say Republicans come out to vote, more so than Democrats, then maybe that's the poll numbers that you should be looking at. That 10 percentage mark, 3% undecided, 3% other, and lower likely turnout. Um, that would be Biden by 7. So all these numbers have Biden ahead by more than 5 points, which would give him the edge in Pennsylvania right now. And again, the Monmouth University polls have been rated an A plus by 538, so they take a lot of those polls and average them out into these, um, which is why Joe Biden's lead, is at 7.4, and after those polls, it shows that it's pretty stable in that scenario. So that would be another state flipping. So we have Florida, Pennsylvania, one congressional district in Nebraska, and Michigan flipping so far for Joe Biden. And then we have one more state that we're going to go over. But before we go to that one more state, let's just look at Texas for a second, because Texas is a state that Donald Trump did not outperform Hillary in. He still won by more than 5 points, but he didn't outperform where his polls numbers were at. Right now, he leads by zero point 0.6 points, and this, you know, has been consistently close even before the pandemic. You could see he was leading by 3.9 points, so it hasn't veered above that 5 point mark. Where obviously he defeated Hillary by that measure, but even before the pandemic, um, he really wasn't beating Biden by those numbers. He still leading for most of the time. Biden held a lead for maybe a day or two of point 0.2 or point 0.1, but now it's actually point 0.6, not point 0.1. So yeah, so right now it's at less than a percentage point. You could see a poll yesterday had him up by 2. A poll um, earlier in the week had him up by 1, but then other polls earlier in the week had Biden up by 5. Another poll in July had Trump up by 4, and another one had Biden up by 2. So this has really been back and forth based on the polling. But again, we're not going to change anything because we are giving this map a map where Trump overperforms. And if he overperforms, then he will still carry Texas. But it's interesting that the race is that close as it is. So lastly, let's go to Wisconsin, a state that Donald Trump carried. And again, this was the state that Hillary Clinton had the highest lead. She had about a 5.3 point advantage, and Donald Trump won by less than 1 percentage point. So again, let's say Donald Trump outperforms Hillary by that same number. So even more than 5, we'll say 6 points, because he won by about zero point 0.7 points, and he was down in the polling by about 0.5 by about 5.3 points. With a 7.2 point advantage, Biden would still carry the state, and he's been holding an advantage of at least that for you know more than a month, about a month at least. He's been up by more than 6 points, and really ever since the pandemic got bad, the last time Trump led was on April 14th. Around the time the pandemic was getting bad, and ever since then, Joe Biden has been leading it with pretty steady marks, and that lead increasing by the end of June and now into July. So that would give Biden the state of Wisconsin. So again, in this map, we gave Trump 5 points more than he is being shown on the polling. He only outperformed one state, Wisconsin, by more than 5 points in the 2016 election. So we're not in November yet. We're on July 15th. We're still 3.5 months away from the election. But considering the fact that Joe Biden is up by more than 5 points in the polling in 4 states that Hillary didn't win: Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And honestly, you could take if you don't if you could take away Florida from that, and Joe Biden would still win. But this is a map of Donald Trump outperforming his current polling by 5 points. And again, there were states where Joe Biden winning um, was winning by less than 5 points, and there were actually quite a few. They were North Carolina, Ohio, Georgia, and Arizona. So you could see what the map might look like if Trump doesn't overperform the way that he did in 2016. It could get kind of ugly, but you know, let's give it the benefit of the doubt that things might get better by November and his polling numbers might get better by November. And we'll say, you know, that lightning might strike twice and Donald Trump will outperform the way he did in 2016. But if the polling numbers continue to stay stable for Joe Biden, unless Donald Trump outperforms even far more than he did in 2016, then Joe Biden would still win the Electoral College with room to spare 308 electoral votes to 230 electoral votes, is the way it would look right now, with Donald Trump outperforming polling as he did in 2016. So, again, reasons for Democrats to be optimistic at this point in time. Obviously, a lot has gone on between not just the pandemic, but the racial unrest and the messages Donald Trump has been giving out throughout all of that, and the growing numbers in swing states like Florida, Arizona, and Texas may also have an effect on the race. But we'll have to wait and see how things turn out. I wouldn't get too excited yet, just because we're still a whiles away from the election. Um, so we have to, just continue to look at where the polling is and realize that polling has changed since the 2016 election. So it might be more accurate now than it was in 2016. But continue to look at these maps as if Donald Trump may outperform the way he did in 2016. And in this point in time, the Democrats should feel good about where they're at, but they shouldn't stay stagnant either and just feel like it's over, because I think that both the Republican Party and Democratic parties have underestimated Trump and his supporters a number of times before. So it's definitely not the time to do that right now. But for right now, um, with Donald Trump outperforming polling 538 polling by 5 points, um, Joe Biden's able to flip Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and one electoral vote from Nebraska for a 308 to 230 electoral victory this November. We'll see what happens in the weeks to come. Um, and we'll continue with these videos in the weeks to come. And I hope you enjoyed this one. Again, um, I'm trying to make the maps not partisan, and that's why I wanted to do this map today, showing a map where Donald Trump outperforms polling by more than even the margin of errors are concerned. Um, so hopefully that's useful to some people. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe. Let me know if there's any specific types of videos regarding the elections that you want to see on this channel, because I'm looking for different ideas onto how to make this map in the weeks to come, um, and using different websites and platforms and polling to do that. But for this one, that's gonna be it for today. Thanks for watching if you did, and have a great day.